One of my all-time favorite phrases is there is a first time for everything. I think everybody remembers at least one first that they've experienced in their life. Today's conversation is actually the first time that I have had a sibling on. For anyone that's even familiar with my YouTube channel, you will remember that I had on Christina Coccoluto, and she was hailing all the way from my old stomping grounds in the state of Massachusetts. Well, today I'm privileged to have Christina's sister on. And so before I even get started, I want to take a minute to introduce Vanessa Federico. And I want to thank you first and foremost for your time and your willingness to have the conversation with me.
Of course. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be the first sibling on here. Hopefully, first of many.
It's very rare. I was surprised when you responded to my message and all of a sudden you're like, I'm Christina's sister. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fantastic because
Yeah.
it's one thing to get the story from one individual. It's something else to get the story from a second individual, but it is very, very rare to get the same story from siblings within the same family. And
Yeah.
so if anyone remembers Christina's story, she is a previvor. So she discovered that she had the BRCA1 gene mutation. And as a result, it made her at a higher risk of certain types of cancer. And unbeknownst to me, I would now have the opportunity to have a secondary conversation. And so, Vanessa, what I'd like to do, I'm just going to dive in the deep end and I'm going to ask you to share your own story simply because I want to preface it this way. In your bio on your Instagram page, you have one of the greatest lines that I have ever seen. And it is simply this: be the inspiration that you seek. And so I would love to build on that and just have you share a little bit of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that quote kind of stems from I have an educator background. And so I always want to be a great role model to others, especially when I was teaching, younger students. I had the 13 to 14-year-old range. But as I've stepped away from the classroom and sort of finding myself in this provider space, I want to make sure that my page is focused on education first, right? Because that is what I was thinking when I was going through this journey, really. And so I had my family to lean back on. So for those of you that remember Christina's story, we have a mom who is a two-time breast cancer survivor, and the BRCA1 gene runs through our family. My mom is one of three sisters. All three sisters carry the BRCA1 gene mutation, and I am one of three sisters, and two out of three of us carry the BRCA1 gene mutation. So this family risk, this hereditary cancer, is not something that was a complete shock to us, but something that just lived in the background for so long. And so when each of us sort of stepped into our journey of figuring out whether we carried this or not, this gene mutation really shaped like who we were and how we viewed health going forward. And so for those of you that don't know, Christina and I have a 7-year age gap between us. So when she was going through her journey, I was at a very different phase of life altogether. She was about 25 when she found out she was BRCA positive, and I was going to college. So it's just very different paths, but many of our stories mirror each other. But also, many of the decisions my sister made or some of the things that she went through the healthcare system, I was sort of able to wiggle my way around and say, oh, I don't want to do what she did or have to go through that. So I'm going to change my path completely. And I can get into more of that as well.
It's always nice when you have somebody that is able to go before you, sort of like a forerunner. And you mentioned even your own family history. And you said that there's a 7-year age gap. And so my question right off the bat is, what was it like when you heard Christina's diagnosis? What was it like? Was there any type of fear, trepidation, concern inside of you, especially given the family history?
Absolutely. I think for a long time, it just felt inevitable.
Mhm.
But until you have that information, like you really can't think that way. Like until you hear the words like you've tested positive for XYZ gene mutation. But that's easier said than done to just tell somebody like, oh, like don't worry about it until you know the results. But I think I tested, 6 years after she did. I was 24. I think there's just a part of me that always knew that this was inside of me. And
Mhm.
again, there was no proof to that, but it ended up being true. It just, that was what I knew.
Wow. So you said that when Christina was diagnosed, she was 25, and I recently had on Leah Alexis, and she is a melanoma survivor. And the interesting thing about her story is that for some reason it's this age of 25. I don't know what it is about women and 25. Her story began when she was 25. I know Christina's story began when she was 25. Yours is at the age of 24. So is 24, 25, is that a magic number? Is that a magic window? Is it something that women need to be aware of?
Sure, exactly. I think if this runs in your family, I think it's up to you to decide when you're ready. Technically, I was 23 when I got tested, and I found out on my 24th birthday that I had tested positive. That's just when I emotionally felt ready to hear whether it was a yes. If it was a no, that's a different conversation to have, a totally different, like it's called like survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it was like when if I'm positive, when will I feel ready? And who knows if like there's a time stamp to say that you'll ever be ready, right?
Right.
But it's one of those things where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to find out and I'm ready to take the next steps forward in my health journey if I get that result, which ended up being the case. So from there on out, it was a whole series of a lot of surveillance over the next few years. But in terms of like the age 24, 25, yeah, I don't know if it's just maybe a maturity level of really like having that time you're, if you went to college, you're out of college, you're sort of like working and figuring out adult life a little bit more. So your brain is fully developed at 25. There's part of your frontal cortex. So
Mm,
maybe that has something to do with it too. I don't know the science behind it. It'd be really fascinating to find out. But emotionally, that's just when I felt I was ready.
mm. So I'm really curious about those 6 years after you became aware of Christina's diagnosis and, of course, her path that she was going to take in order to begin her pre-Viber journey. Can you talk to me about what those 6 years were like? You mentioned you were preparing to go to college. So I can't imagine what it is like hearing this from your sister, knowing what it could mean, especially in light of the family history. You're 18 years old, you're preparing to go to college, you're wondering if you yourself are a carrier of this gene mutation. What was that experience like? Were you able to enjoy college, or was it secretly this was something that was in the back of your mind that you were concerned about and worried about?
Yeah. I mean, I think all of it, right? I was definitely able to enjoy myself in college for sure. I went to college in Boston and I was a college basketball player. So I was very busy as a student athlete. But I think in the back of my mind, it was always this like, this could be my future someday too. And that really hit me maybe like right as around the time I was graduating from college. Christina, she talked about this on the episode with you where she had found a lump. And I
Hmm.
think that was my senior year of college. And it was right after my niece was born, not too long after. And that was like the catalyst that moved her life forward in terms of her survivorship journey. And so, like, that is when it really became real like, oh my God, this could really turn into something really scary really quickly. And so, after she decided she was going to have a double mastectomy, she said to me, I'm going to run the Chicago Marathon for Team Bright Pink. And I said, well, you're not going to do this alone. I'm going to do it too. And so we ran it together in 2015, which was like the start of running a marathon before a mastectomy, which I inevitably did right before my mastectomy too. So
Mm.
it was this really great full circle moment of coming together in support of one another as well as sisters. And is just like trying to go through something really tough physically, and both, you know, the marathon is such a great metaphor for a life and for the survivorship journey. And then once you're able to cross that finish line of the 26.2 mile journey in whatever city, you feel like, okay, I can go to the OR room confidently and have this double mastectomy and nothing is going to get in my way.
I know that I had on another individual who has run 17 marathons, and he is an avid gold star finisher, which for anybody that is not familiar with what an avid is literally running a marathon in six of the major cities. So I know that number has increased, but it's Chicago, it's New York, it's Boston, Tokyo, it's Berlin, and it's London. I believe those are the six. I believe they just added Sydney as number seven. And I also believe that they are going to be adding Hong Kong and Cape Town in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the progression, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was not as crazy because when we ran Chicago, like the talks of the Abbott medal were very, it's not what it is today. When
Mhm,
I remember when we went to the Chicago Expo and they had the medal, we were like, it's cool. That's like such a nice medal. It's such like a crazy dream that maybe someday we can achieve this.
mhm,
And Christina did, which is amazing. She's the first woman globally to receive the Abbott medal after a mastectomy and complete hysterectomy, which is
mhm.
unreal.
Yeah. I remember her describing her preparation for the running the marathons, especially after having the hysterectomy. I remember her talking about doing training in a pool, and I think she said it was, I can't remember if it was 18 weeks or 28 weeks as far as the recovery time, but here she is preparing to run the marathon afterwards. So my question is, how many marathons have you run? Is it just the Chicago, or have you run other marathons?
Done 4 of the world majors, plus Disney. I did the Disney marathon, which is separate from the world majors, but in total 5 marathons. And then Christina and I have done 4 4 out of the 6 together. I didn't do Berlin because I just had a baby, and she did Tokyo right before we did London. So, in terms of the ones we ran together, we did Chicago. That was before I knew I was BRCA positive, and it was right before her double mastectomy. And then we did New York in 2018, which was right after I found out I was BRCA positive and her first marathon post mastectomy. And then COVID happened. And so racing wasn't happening for a while. And then it looked like virtual running for a few years. But
Mhm,
then when I was deciding to have and book and plan my double mastectomy, I decided I wanted to run Boston. And that's when she mapped out like literally in reverse order how many weeks until from her hysterectomy to the Boston Marathon, said it was going to be 18 weeks. And she signed up alongside with me, and our younger sister Stephanie did too. So the three of us, that was the first marathon the three of us got to run together, which was unbelievable. And then Christina's, where she received the Abbott medal in London, that was my first race post mastectomy and post baby. So
mm.
a lot of firsts in many arenas in both of our lives.
So I have never run a race with my brother. I've never run a 5K, never run a 10K, never run a half marathon, let alone a full 26.2 mile marathon. There's two questions that I really can't help but ask. And here's the foundation for the questions. One of the greatest things in life is to know that you're not alone. One
Mhm.
of the greatest things in life is knowing that you have support, knowing that you have someone that has either been where you've been previously or someone that is willing to literally walk with you through what you're going. But yet, your story with you and Christina, it's interesting that you and Christina share a story that you and Christina and your younger sister don't share because she doesn't have the gene mutation. So, what was it like? I would say training for the marathon, number one. But I guess the second part to that question is what was it like running it with your sister, especially knowing how impactful that was?
Yeah. So training is is the marathon almost in itself. It's almost more grueling and tiresome and all the things because it's so many months. And it's not just, your training days, it's the day before, it's what you're eating, your sleeping schedule, if you're sleeping, your recovery. So all of those things like have an impact. But when you have a sister, especially I have two very high achieving sisters who are like, oh, get up, we're going to go for a run. Or like, what time are we meeting to do XYZ? That helps keep you motivated and keep you accountable, which is amazing. And especially where Christina and I had run a few under our belt, especially before, Boston, before the three of us ran together. we sort of had like a wealth of knowledge and were able to help guide our sister Stephanie as much as we could. And then the marathon itself is sort of a celebration of all of the hard work that you get to do. And hopefully you're healthy enough at the start line to get to the finish, because there's a lot that can go wrong in between a training cycle. So that is this. It's just a celebration. The whole marathon. If you ever get to, maybe if you don't get to run a marathon, I hope someday you get to watch a marathon, because it's truly, you just see the best of society and the best of human nature.
Do you remember what it was like when you crossed the first finish line, having completed that 26.2-mile marathon? And if so, what was that experience like for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was 22. I definitely didn't know anything about nutrition or taking care of my body. I'm pretty sure like I would drink the night before a long run. Like I had no idea what I was doing, because you're 22 and you're not supposed to know what you're doing. I was working full time for like the first time in my life, right? And so you're trying to squeeze in these runs here and there. But ultimately, we were running for a cause that was greater than ourselves. And I think when you're running with or for a charity and raising money for something like cancer research, or at that time we were raising money for educational resources for women like us who are high risk for cancer, that takes away a lot of the complaining that you do and like the snide comments that you make to yourself along the way. You're like, God, my butt hurts, or my God, I have a blister. And then you remember your why and your purpose, and you come back to that. So having that is such a motivator in itself. And I can't, if you ever get the chance to run a marathon, this goes to anybody, run for a charity. It'll change your life. It'll change your perspective. And there's a lot of noise on the internet right now about charity runners, but they belong at the start line, at the finish line, throughout the race. They're raising critical funds for so many different diseases, cancers, kids, first responders. Like there's a cause for everything. And if you can find the thing that you're connected to, raise money for that and run, it's just an unbelievable feeling.
You spoke about the why, and I know that you ran for a cause, you ran for a charity, and I, of course, remember your sister's story, but what I want to really understand is I want to understand the why. What was your underlying why? What was it that made you decide for the very first time, you know what, I am going to run a marathon? Was it that you wanted to challenge yourself? Was I know your sister, you wanted to run with her, but what was the meaning and the impact for you personally?
Mm. Well, for the first marathon, I didn't know I was BRCA positive yet. And my sister was about to be going through the unimaginable, going through a double mastectomy. I have no idea what that was like. And so the only thing that I could really do was support her. And I could have done that just by donating to her page and going to Chicago on a plane just to cheer. But I thought like, and we were running at very different paces at that time too, but starting at the start line together, and just knowing we were going through this 26.2-mile journey together, no matter what that looked like for each of us, was my why. It was the reason why I laced up my sneakers and went. It was for her. And inevitably, I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, it was going to be for me too. I didn't see that yet. I didn't know that that was also going to be part of my journey and part of my story. But along the way, it was kind of planting the seeds to like, yeah, you're raising money for things that you're going to eventually need.
Your sister was preparing for a double mastectomy. She's planning on running the marathon. You make the decision that you're going to run with her. You want to be there to support her. You want to be there to encourage her. You want her to know that she's not alone. You want to show up as the sister that is loving and caring and kind and gentle and whatever other adjectives that we were thinking. But I have a question, and I can't help but wonder, who was there for you when it was your turn and you finally made the decision? What was that process for you like? Did you have a support system, family, sisters? Who was there to come alongside of you and help you when it was finally your turn for you to engage this process?
Yeah. So my family for sure was there every step along the way, from hearing me complain on phone calls after appointments. And my husband, who was my boyfriend and then fiance at the time, came to every single appointment with me for all my surveillance. He came to every consultation. And so I have just such an amazing support system that I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without. And they were each there, I think, for me at different points in that journey, whether it was providing meals during the mastectomy time, just coming over to sit with me on the couch, just talking about different various plans. I remember when I had my first consultation with a surgeon and it didn't go the way I wanted to, like my entire family was there for me to support me and help me kind of guide myself through that time because it was not the news I wanted to hear. But my family, like, unfortunately knows cancer and we know what it takes. So when someone's going through it, I think we just know how to pick up the pieces and support each other in ways that might not, like a friend might not be able to necessarily know how to do. But my family, unfortunately, we know this side of it. And so sometimes there isn't always necessarily the right thing to say. It's just being there.
I don't know if you've ever seen the interview with John Bernthal and Shia LaBeouf, but one of the things that Shia LaBeouf talked about in that interview, and it's probably one of the most candid, real, raw moments, is he talked about his wife. And he talked about something and he referred to it as the ministry of presence. Just being there, not necessarily needing to have all the right words to say, not necessarily needing to have the best encouragement, not needing to be able to produce all these wonderful quotes that you could probably find online, but just being there. And I think that there's something to be said about that because, especially when you're going through something as trying, as traumatic as that, sometimes you're not looking for the right answers. Sometimes you're not looking for the eloquent speech. Sometimes you don't need someone to sit there and send you a song or a podcast or whatever else you might find encouraging. Sometimes it's just having somebody sit there with you and letting you know, I'm here with you. I've got you. You're not alone. I think that's something that's so incredibly powerful. What was it like when you heard that news for the first time that you were BRCA1 positive? Especially, I know you had already watched everything your sister had done, but what was it like for you personally?
Yeah, I think even having watched my sister go through it, it still gutted me. It
Yeah.
still was this really raw, like it was, I felt like my world was crashing down around me and there was nothing I could do to kind of swim out of it, get to the surface just to breathe. But with time and perspective and really understanding kind of my risk and the things that I had control over was the piece that I needed to kind of grow through and understand before I could make the leap to then have surgery. But yeah, at 24 years old, it's like you have so much, you have no idea, like there's so many unanswered questions and so many things that you're still trying to figure out. And I just remember feeling like my world was crashing down on me, which sounds so dramatic. I'm just trying to think back to my 24-year-old self. And that's how I felt. But you know, I don't feel that way anymore. I totally see it as a gift and a blessing and all of those things. And it's given me so much perspective and time and being able to really be grateful for my health and to take action and advocate for myself and to really help others along their journeys as well. That's
Mm.
ultimately what I hope to give back to my community is to help them navigate this because like you said before, like no one wants to feel alone through this. And when you first get diagnosed, it feels lonely. Even though I had a mom who'd been through it, even though I had a sister who had been through it, it can feel lonely when it's just you. Like who do you go to? You know?
Can you remember back to your 24-year-old self and what you did to show up for yourself? What did Vanessa do for Vanessa to help her through that process? Was there something that you did for yourself that no one else could have done? Was there something that you did to give you your own motivation, your own encouragement during that time?
Yes and no. I feel like before I found out that I was BRCA positive, I had my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and my sister. They both came with me to genetic counseling, which my older sister Christina didn't get the chance to do. When she found out she was BRCA positive, she had found out through her PCP just through a blood test, which is a very different experience than going to a place like Dana Farber that solely is cancer focused. and having the minds and the brilliant people there to kind of guide you through that emotionally and set you up for success afterwards. So for anyone who's considering testing, like I would definitely recommend genetic counseling as well, because it helps you kind of see the breakdown of your family tree, and to really understand hereditary cancer and your personal risk. So I think that was like a gift, I guess, for myself that I gave to myself because, yeah, sure, I could have spit into a tube and sent it off to some lab and got the results, but I wouldn't have had the emotional support to guide me through the rest of what those decisions are going to look like. And then as for 24-year-old Vanessa, I guess the running piece I think was really a huge outlet for me to really kind of find myself. Even though I'm not a good runner, I'm not fast. It just helps you like get that mental clarity, that headspace to truly feel free, and to like not think about anything for however long that run is, whether it's 20 minutes, an hour. It's time for yourself to really connect with who you are, with your breathing, the environment, your steps, all of those things. So any opportunity I had to run, just to get out for a few minutes or to sign up for a race was invigorating.
Is there any advice or encouragement that you would give to your 24-year-old self, knowing everything that you know now? If you could go back in time and sit your younger self down and give her any type of advice, what would you say?
I would tell Vanessa that you are so much more than just your bracket diagnosis. There's so much more to you that you don't even know yet. And things are going to get really good. Things are going to get tough, but things are going to get really good too. And I think at 24 years old, I just saw the doom and gloom of it all and thought it was going to be the end of the world. But I've found so much community and connection through this experience. And I don't feel alone. I feel so connected to so many other people saying like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Or could you share what you went through when you went through reconstruction, blah, blah, blah. And so for me, like that is such a huge piece is like finding community through all of this. And I don't think I thought at 24 I needed community or that I was ever going to find community, but here I am sharing, the vulnerable sides of myself through this and finding other people who are just looking for the same thing. And I think that's beautiful.
What was it like when you made the decision to share your story? I know I'm kind of jumping ahead with this, but I want to build on what you just said because you talked about something that I did not fully understand. I'll be 45 in a couple of years. And I don't think I was in my 40s when I finally started understanding the importance of community. Community is probably the biggest motivator for what I'm doing right now. It is the biggest motivator for why I'm having these conversations. If anyone goes to my page, you'll see my bio. My mission statement is creating community one story and conversation at a time. And I think that there's something that is incredibly powerful about that. There's something that community can offer that trying to go it alone does not provide. What has the community offered you specifically, whether it's people that have been where you've been, or whether it's people who you're trying to encourage that are going through this themselves and they're perhaps struggling with a lot of the same emotions? Because I see community as being a double edged sword. People who have been where you've been and you're able to walk, side by side, you're sharing your stories together like you and Christina. But then I think the other aspect of community too are those people that you're looking behind you and they're perhaps facing this for the first time. So what has that been like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm still figuring that out as I go. I don't think I'll ever have like the full answer to that question because I think I'm always going to be sort of in it. And that's the goal, right? Is to always be part of the community and in navigating what that really looks like. But my first taste of it was when Christina was going through her double mastectomy, and we went to like a tiny support group in Boston with like four other. And she asked me, she said, will you come with me to Panera to meet some of these women who were going through the same thing? And I said, yeah, sure. Again, not knowing that I was BRCA positive yet. So I was just going to be a support. And sometimes you just need somebody else there as a second pair of ears because getting that information the first time can be a challenge. And so it's nice to have somebody there with you. But I think that was sort of my first taste of community in terms of like a small group of women just talking about shared experiences. And so when eventually it became my turn, I just wanted to, not everyone has a big sister that they can just call and be like, hey, is this normal? Or is this something
Um,
that like you went through too? And so I hope to be sort of like a sister or a pal or a friend that others can lean on as well, because I know not everyone has that. And I know when I was going through, creating my page, again, I was just kind of like posting and throwing quotes out there and sharing parts of my story, but not really realizing that behind the scenes, like I would get messages like weeks, months later saying how helpful it was for somebody else. And if my page does one thing, or if something I said or went through helps just one person, like that's everything to me. It doesn't have to, I don't have to have this huge reach, this huge audience. But if I have just a couple of people who say, like, wow, that really resonated with me, or oh, I'm about to go through this too. Can you help me, ask the questions I need to be prepared to ask my surgeon? Like, that is my jam. I love that stuff. Especially coming from an educator background, like if I can help give you the tools to succeed and to feel confident in maybe areas that I maybe didn't feel confident when I was going through it, and could help someone like have a better starting off point than I did. That's to me is community. It's really helping others and paying it forward in a way that maybe was done for me in some capacity, but in a way that I can sort of have that influence to help somebody else on their journey as well. Because like with Christina and I, even though we literally share the same DNA, our two stories could be more different in many aspects. There's many parts where we marry each other, but even as sisters, we have totally different stories. You could carry a different type of gene and have a totally different story as well. But I think there's no two BRCA survivors who are the same.
there's one person that I'm really curious about in terms of this community aspect. And not even just the community aspect, but the whole familial aspect. You and Christina had the opportunity to share something. You had the opportunity to share the experience of double mastectomy. You both shared the story of being previvors. You have something that you share even with your mom and with your aunts, but I can't help but think about your younger sister. I can't help but think, and her name is Stephanie, correct? Okay. I can't help but think about her because she doesn't have the same story that you guys had. She doesn't have that same experience. And when I'm thinking about community, when I'm thinking about even the concept of family, I'm curious what your relationship is like with her because she doesn't share what you and Christina share. And so are there any differences? And this may be a personal question, so forgive me if it's personal, but I can't help but think about her because she's one of, let's say, six people that does not have this associated with her, knock on wood, potentially yet. But what's your relationship like with her?
Yeah, she's definitely not my first call in terms of like, hey, like, can you help me navigate this thing? Because she doesn't go through it. It's much easier for me to pick up the phone and call Christina because she knows what that is like. But for Stephanie, she often talks about how she experiences this term survivor's guilt, and thinking, well, why did you two get chosen for this, and why not me? And I think for some people that might feel strange, like, well, of course you don't want this. This is put you at really high risk for cancer. But I think it starts to put that question in your mind, like, well, how come I was saved? Right. And so for her, that's like a completely different scenario. But but in terms of like her support as a sister, she's so supportive. She's been there for both Christina and I for our recoveries, our healing, anything that we need. And I think back to my mom and her sisters, and the three of them when they were going through their own breast cancer diagnoses, they had each other, but the conversation wasn't being had. It wasn't like this, like pick up your sister and call her all the time. Like it was very much enclosed. I'm sure they did talk to one another, but it's not like it is today, where this conversation is getting much more widely accepted. And so for Stephanie, I feel like she definitely hears a lot from Christina and I, and I think she's still part of the community, even though she's not bracket positive because she's a support system, you know?
You said something that I think is really interesting. It's something that I've wrestled with, especially having been someone that grew up in the church and this whole concept of support, this whole concept of community. And there's a lot of people that feel like you have to have walked through what I walked through in order to be a support for me. You made the comment that Stephanie is not particularly going to be the first person that you're going to pick up the phone and call. So here's a question, because it is something that I've wrestled with. Do we as men, as women, as society, as culture, do we need to have shared experiences in order to be a true and genuine support for other people? Or is it possible to be a support? Because here's the thing. Here's the reason why I'm asking this. I know this is your story. I know this is Christina's story, I'd be remiss to say that there's a part of me that doesn't go out to Stephanie as well. And I would love to sit down with her and hear her story about this and
Yeah,
what it's like seeing your mom and your aunts walk through all of this, seeing your two older sisters walk through all of this. Somehow you were spared. Somehow you were saved. The guilt that comes with it. Why not? Which is such a strange question, because there's almost two questions that are being asked. The first is, why me? Why did I get it? That could be the question that you and Christina has, but the question that she has is completely different. Well, why not me? Why
yeah.
didn't I get it? And I've never really thought about the guilt that would be associated with that. So, what do you think? What have you seen in your younger sister in terms of support that you perhaps haven't seen in Christina? In what ways has she been able to support you that is perhaps different than what your older sister did, especially being someone that doesn't have this shared experience?
Sure. I feel like as somebody who's maybe a little bit more removed from some of the medical jargon and things like that, it's easier to talk to Stephanie in some regards about just some of the emotional pieces to this and not wanting to bring up anything that could hurt or like, I don't know. I don't think it was Christina and I are such open books that we talk about pretty much anything all the time. So I don't know that that really applies, but for like maybe other siblings, like it maybe could be a trigger for somebody else. Again, that doesn't apply to Christina and I because we're so open. We talk about literally anything all the time. But, having somebody who's maybe not in it can also be really helpful
Mhm.
in having those conversations because they can give you kind of just like not their own experience or their own biases in terms of like where they're coming from. They can kind of give you a different perspective. And sometimes that's huge, is getting just someone who can listen. They can offer support in other ways, like dropping off a coffee to your house or just like, just being there to drive you to an appointment or things like that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be like is this normal type of question, but just asking like, hey, well, like, will you come and like take the dog for a walk? Because I am sitting here and have drains hanging from my body and can't necessarily do that. And then just like, just kind of like keeping that normal sister bond, not like that anything didn't happen, but just like Stephanie and I have a different relationship where she's younger than me. And so, and obviously she's younger than Christina, and I'm the middle child of both. But having somebody who can kind of bring like the lightness and the fun and can joke around with you and kind of keep things normal. Whereas like if Christina and I are having these conversations, they're like a little bit more like rooted in the survivorship journey and experiences or like comparing notes.
Right.
Whereas like I don't have to do that with Stephanie. I hope that makes sense. That's a long-winded way of saying that.
No, it makes complete sense. And like I said, there's so many questions that I'm forced, not even forced to ask with this conversation, but questions that come to my mind because of this dynamic,
Yeah.
because of your mom and your two aunts, because of you and Christina. And then here is Stephanie, who has somehow managed to escape all of this. But one thing I do want to say is that before I came across your sister's page, I didn't even know the word freediver existed. Before I came across her page, I did not know what BRCA1 even was. I was completely clueless. And one of the things that she said in their conversation is that when your mom and your aunts were going through this, people weren't really having conversations. And of course, this was well before the age of social media. And now, I mean, if you have an iPhone, a tripod, and AirPods like I have right now, you can go on social media and tell your story to the world. And so my question for you is I've heard it from your sister, but I want to hear it from you. And it's your understanding of the BRCA1. So what actually is it outside of it make putting you at risk to different types of cancer? What is it just for anybody that perhaps didn't watch your sister, didn't even know I had a conversation with her, but they're listening to you?
Yeah. So the BRCA1 gene is we have lots of different genes in our body that do a lot of different things. It stands for like breast cancer gene. There's one and two. The one we both have and carry the BRCA1 gene mutation, and there's also BRCA2. Each gene mutation, meaning that there's something that's wrong in the DNA in terms of what cells are able to repair and do. So because my gene for the BRCA1 is mutated, it allows cells to more easily kind of bypass and skip through some of that processing
Mhm.
and increases your risk for certain cancers like breast, ovarian, skin, and et cetera, right? And so for BRCA2, it has a little bit different risk for similar cancers, but also like the elevations of risk are slightly different.
Mhm.
And so we were lucky enough to know that our lineage carries this. And I think what's really important to note is that men carry this too. Even though we've
Mhm.
talked a lot about the women in my family, this BRCA1 gene actually came from my mom and my aunt's father, my
Wow.
grandfather.
Wow.
So his side of the family is kind of like where the lineage starts with this. And obviously, that generation definitely wasn't talking about this.
I
And so my grandfather's sisters had breast cancer. And, at that point in time, like, breast cancer looked very different. Like they're getting to the point where like it's causing death at that point. Like you're not having the preventative screenings and things like that to kind of look out for these things. Whereas for my mom's generation and for my aunts, they found out they were BRCA1 positive after they were diagnosed with breast cancer. So that conversation looks even totally different. And now here enters our generation as, millennials, and we're getting the information ahead of time. So we now know about the BRCA1 gene. We can screen for it, we can test for it, and then we can do the surveillance, hopefully before the cancer comes, which is why we do the risk reducing surgeries. And now the conversation's starting to shift about now that we're having kids, like what's that going to look like in the future for our children? And many women, I did not do this, and my sister didn't either, but there's a lot of great conversations happening around IVF and being able to extract that BRCA1 gene from your lineage completely.
mm,
So there's a lot of good to be happening, and this is why we're such great advocates for cancer research so that we can have the time and the information to make decisions for not only ourselves but for our kids.
I remember when I was talking to your sister and she was describing the process and the decision to have the double mastectomy. And I believe the word that she used was the word mutilating, essentially mutilating your body and the struggle that she had with that concept and looking at yourself in the mirror and wrestling with that decision, knowing what it's going to cost you because that's a part of you that you've had for however many years. And to even think that you're going to remove something that's been a part of you for so long, something that if you're a nursing mother, it's also something that is incredibly important. So, what was it like for you when you were wrestling with those thoughts? Did you see it as the same thing? Dear God, I'm about to potentially mutilate my body. I'm potentially going to remove parts of me that I've had for years. And did you experience any type of, I'm going to call it the morning after? Did you experience any type of guilt or any type of regret or shame afterward once you woke up and you're like, what did I just do?
Mm. Those are all really good questions. And I think those are a lot of the same questions that many providers have, especially in I'm going to call it like the before surgery, and then there's like life after surgery. But before, I think, is when I was probably at my worst. To be honest, it's when all of those questions sort of compound. And it's something that is more of like an internal battle. Like, I don't know how I'm going to look. Am I going to hate my body? I won't be able to breastfeed. I won't be able to do XYZ. Will I ever be able to play basketball again? Was something that I was concerned about. Will I ever be able to lift weights again? Will I ever fit into like my clothes? There's like all of those, like, they seem like little things, but they really do become the big things because they make up part of who you are. And so I think a lot of like the guilt questions for me came beforehand. But then once I reduced my risk and actually like went through the surgery, I felt such relief. I was at peace with my decision.
Mhm.
Truly. I like it's my risk for breast cancer obviously has reduced significantly, but up here, it's also like the noise has reduced a lot, which I think is like the biggest blessing in disguise that I can come away from this because I didn't know I was going to feel that way. I wasn't sure if I was going to wake up, see the bandages and hate myself,
Yeah.
but I didn't feel that way. I felt like truly such relief.
So you woke up perhaps from the surgery, and I don't know when you were able to look at yourself in the mirror for the first time without maybe any bandages or anything like that, without getting too descriptive or graphic. But
Sure.
I can only imagine what it was like when you saw your body for the first time, because I know you said that there was a sense of relief. Is relief the word that you want to use to describe how you felt when you actually visibly, physically saw the result of your decision?
I'm not sure if relief was the one that came to mind when I first saw myself because I still had a long way to go. I still had another surgery to truly sort of see where things were going to land. But it was definitely scary waking up and seeing those bandages. Like, you couldn't see much, but when the bandages came off,
Yeah.
I didn't regret it. I knew I still had a long journey ahead, but
Mm,
I was just like, okay, this is just part of it. This is just a piece of it. And we're almost like at that next finish line. So it was almost kind of like, okay, like we got to this mileage and we've had a little bit of a setback and we just have to get to the next part and deal with it when we get there. But in terms of, I feel like the noise that I had in my brain in terms of, am I going to get breast cancer someday? Or when am I going to find the lump? Is it going to be in the shower? Is it going to be when I'm on the beach? Is it going to be, when I was trying on wedding dresses? That's what I worried about. And that's the noise that was constantly going on in my brain and firing off all the time. And that just got quiet after
mm.
surgery, which was, I think, for me, made it feel like, okay, this was the right decision for me.
In the world of cancer, there is a word that most people don't like to talk about. Well, people want to talk about remission, and there's this whole conversation of, I'm just going to use the two words, it's bad. There's been people that have taken steps, they've taken measures in order to remove the cancer from their bodies or remove the risk from it. Is what you and what your sister did, is it foolproof in that it completely eliminates the risk for anything happening in the future? Or is there still a risk that is there just because of the gene or just because of your family history?
Sure. So before risk reducing surgery, the risk in our lifetime, not necessarily at 30 or 31 or whenever, was at 87%, which is high. If you got an 87 on a test, you'd be like, sweet, that's awesome. But an 87% risk for cancer is pretty high. And that number, you're just playing Russian roulette as you get older, right? And so my mom was diagnosed when she was 40. And the studies are showing that 10 years prior is when you should really start to think about reducing your risk because it really starts to incrementally increase from there. And so, I'm sorry, what was your original question?
Is the double mastectomy that you had and that Christina had, and I know Christina had the added hysterectomy, is what you ladies did foolproof? In other words, does it just minimize the risk? Here's the better way of asking it. Does it simply minimize the risk, or does it completely erase the risk altogether?
Yeah. Okay. So that's where I was going. So 87% risk, right, in your lifetime. And then with the surgery, it brings it to under 5. So it's
Yeah.
not, 0% chance of getting cancer in your lifetime, but it's significantly it's basically less than the general population of everyone else who's not necessarily bracket positive. I believe that number is around 10%, or maybe around 8, but under 5 is significantly less, and it gives you a lot more room to breathe.
Mm. Looking back over your journey, looking back over your experience, is there anything that you would have done differently? Is there anything that you perhaps wouldn't have done, or anything that you would have done, especially having the knowledge that you have now?
Honestly, no, I think even, like, some of the bad experiences I think I had to go through them to get to where I eventually ended up. So, like, yeah, if I could take away some of the, like, difficult conversations I had to have with some surgeons or PAs or whoever, like, sure, we can get rid of those. But I think ultimately it's what shaped my journey and how I was able to advocate for myself. So I wouldn't change a thing in that regard, but, like, sure, it would have been easier if I had, like, a perfect seamless journey, but that's never the case. And I think you have to go through some of those hard conversations, those hardships to really get to ultimately where you want to go. So, for example, I had my first consultation with a surgeon was really pushing one type of reconstruction and was barely listening to a word that I said. And I came away from that conversation feeling so defeated because all I wanted in my mind at, I think I was like 29 years old for my first consult, was to just get in the books and get it done. I was like, I'm ready. I want to be done with this, close this chapter, and move on. But that wasn't the case. I really needed to go through that experience and not just blindly pick a surgeon who was going to do what they wanted. You know what I mean? Like, this is my body. This is the rest of my life that I'm living. I want to be in the hands of somebody who's going to ultimately listen to what I have to say and honor my wishes as well, but also share their expertise and what they think is truly best for me and not what they think is best for them. So having those conversations I think was really helpful for me because it allowed me to sort of speak up and advocate for myself in ways that, like, yeah, sure, I could have just gone with the first guy and said, sure, let's do this. But having that experience, I think, truly shaped my overall experience, which I look back on and think of as positively.
Was there a difference in thought process between surgeries? So, one surgery was to remove parts of your body and thereby reduce the risk, remove the risk. But there's another surgery that you spoke of, which is this whole concept of reconstruction. I can't help but wonder what that thought process is like, number one.
Yeah.
But number two, because here's the question that I'm wondering: does every woman that makes that decision to have either a single or double mastectomy, does every woman come to the underlying conclusion, I'm going to partake in reconstruction, or are there some women that that perhaps opted out of it? Again, this goes back to the whole conversation that we had earlier. For a woman, this is part of you that you've carried for years, that
Yeah.
now all of a sudden to be without it. Have you experienced anybody that made the decisions like, you know what, I'm just gonna continue to live this way? Or is there something along the lines? Is there something in perhaps the female mind, something in the female psyche that really leans towards this concept of reconstruction?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really truly valid question. And what's amazing about where we're at today in society with reconstruction is that there's so many options for and things that you can do that I had no idea you could even do.
Mm,
For example, there's a lot of people in the community who with go reconstruction and they go completely flat. They're called flatties. And, they that's a totally different surgery and aesthetic. And it's a viable option. And it's honestly, that's probably one of the options that isn't talked about enough because I think the assumption is that most women are going to do reconstruction and have some sort of breast implant or tissue or whatever.
mm,
And I think it just having the knowledge and if that's an option that you want, it should be discussed. Even if it's not an option for you, it should be put on the table.
mm,
And for many women, they do have to advocate for that, but that is an option. And then there's breast implant reconstruction, which is what I ultimately went with. But I also talked to my surgeon about potentially doing a deep flap reconstruction and where they use your own tissue in the future. And my surgery came before having kids. And so that was the point of contention with the first surgeon that I had talked about. He was a man. And the question that I had asked him was like, well, if he was pushing for the deep flap reconstruction where they go, it's a incision that goes from hip to hip, and then they use your stomach tissue to create the breast. And so I was like, well, what will that look like if and when I become pregnant? And he was like, oh, you should be fine, was the response that I got. And I was like, should be? Should be fine? What is that supposed to mean? And he's a man. I'm like, you've never given birth. How do I know you know like what's what? And so like that to
Mhm.
me was really unsettling. But I didn't want deep flap to be completely off the table. And so I think talking to your surgeon about like having some idea of what you want is important, but also being open to the possibilities as well. So for me, right now, I have implant reconstruction, and reconstruction is something I'm going to have to go through every 7 to 10 years because it doesn't last forever. But there's a possibility for me to go deep flap in the future, which is unreal based on the incisions that were made and having those open conversations with my plastic surgeon, and just being really open about what you want, or even if you don't know what you want yet, thinking about your future, because I think for a lot of previvors, there's this misunderstanding that you're one and done. And with the deep flap reconstruction, you are technically, but there's always going to be something. You're always going to have to get a scan or make sure that things are okay and have follow up consults with your doctor. So it's never truly over. And I think part of me felt that way in my 20s, thinking like, oh, I just have to do this surgery and I'll be done and put this on the back burner and live my life. But as a provider, it's sort of always going to be there. Whether it's like the breast health or ovarian health, or I'm getting skin checks and other things like that, there's always going to be something to be on the lookout for in terms of your risk.
Your bio says be the inspiration you seek. Looking back over your story, looking back at the life of Vanessa Federico, what is the inspiration in your story? How would you describe the inspiration for your own story? Not your mom's, not your aunt's, not Christina's, your story.
Yeah, I think looking back on my story, what I wish I'd seen more of, as I saw a lot of women having these risk reducing surgeries after having kids. And I think for me, maybe the inspiration is really truly seeing it through the eyes of someone who did it beforehand and knowing that it's going to be okay. That, you can still live your life and do all these amazing, beautiful things. Like it doesn't end when you have this surgery. That you can still I'm still playing basketball when I can. I'm still lifting heavy and strong, and I'm doing all the things that I did beforehand. It looks a little bit different. Sure. Like there's no doubt I'm not the exact same. How can you be the same person that you were before something like this? But I think just wanting to see someone living their life authentically and showing up for themselves in ways that they did before, but also like moving through those emotions in this like quote unquote new body. So I hope for somebody, like I always try and create content and I'm always trying to be mindful of the girl who just found out she was BRCA positive. Right. And thinking back to like how that felt for me. And hopefully someone who is newly diagnosed can feel some sense of relief or hope and knowing that it's going to be okay.
What has been the greatest thing that you have learned about yourself in running the marathons and in training for that? What did you learn about yourself from the physical aspect of running those marathons that you perhaps wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I grew up playing basketball, which is very much heavily relied on others, and it is a team sport. And obviously, like you have to rely on yourself for your own skill, but you have to rely on others as well to kind of get the job done for the ultimate goal of winning or whatever. But with running, it's just you. It's just you, the pavement, your feet moving towards that finish line, hopefully closing that gap like very quickly if you can, or just one step and one foot in front of the other. So learning how to challenge myself and push myself in new ways and really battle the inner sayings of things that come up when it does get hard of like, oh, you can just stop now if you want to, or like you can just not run today, or you can just not finish, and really pushing through those limiting beliefs and those things that are really loud in your mind, especially when you're running, you're hurting and you just want to stop. But what is it that keeps you pushing and moving forward? That's what has like taught me to really keep going and pushing when things get tough, not just in running, but in life too.
Would you say that the greatest thing you learn as a result of training for and running the marathons is the same thing that you learned going through the BRCA 1 process? Or is there perhaps a lesson that you learned through that process that nothing else in life could have prepared you for except walking through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like so many parallels between the running and being a BRCA survivor and going through risk reducing surgeries. There's so many parallels between those two avenues that I didn't necessarily see when I was going through it. But yeah, I think it's learning how to have that self-talk with yourself and to have not just like a positive mindset, because it's not always going to be positive, but really, pushing yourself through some of those limitations and getting to the other side of it.
Think I have one final question for you. You talked about creating content earlier and the mindset that you try and have, maybe depending on the audience that you're wanting to reach. If you could look into the camera right now as if you were creating content that you were going to put on your own page, you could provide any sense of encouragement, any sense of hope, any type of education, whatever you would like to do, what would you say if you could look into the camera right now and speak to somebody and create content that would show up on your page?
I would say that if you are just finding out that you are a wreck survivor, hi, my name is Vanessa, and I'm here to help you guide you in any way that you need. Whether you need someone to just DM at any time, have questions to laugh or cry with, I'm your girl, and I hope that we can connect.
Mhm. You know what? I'm going to follow that up with one more question. This one is, I think, maybe more serious. If you could look into the same camera and offer any type of warning or word of caution to anybody that would watch this, whether it's genetic testing, as you mentioned, versus just blood work, whether it's having the conversations, what warnings would you give to anybody who would be watching this?
I would say that for many people, there's a ton of misconceptions about breast reconstructions and mastectomies, whether they are because of a cancer diagnosis or doing so to reduce your risk. A mastectomy is not a boob job. It is not something that you can just magically say, like, oh, yes, I'm going to do this and look better and yada, yada. No, there are real emotional implications to this. And it is not just about looking good or looking like a Barbie doll. There are real human emotions behind these decisions. So cut it out.
You strike me as someone that, like your sister, and I'm sure like your mom and like your aunts, and even like Stephanie, I am simple enough to believe that the women in your family are very strong, capable women. What would you say as we round this conversation out and bring it to a close? What would you say your greatest strength is at this point in your life, having gone through everything that you've gone through? What would you say your greatest strength is?
My greatest strength, I think, just based off of my family dynamic and where I personally land, is being a great listener. As a middle child, you're sort of thrown into the mix and able to sort of take a lot of information from both sides, from all sides, and really being able to process and kind of filter through some of that, but to really be a supportive person also through and despite a lot of those things. I would say like my listening is something that I'm really proud of. And especially as a sister, because, sisters, we all share and connect and talk to each other all the time. And I always want to make sure that I'm someone that can be relied upon and be a supportive person. Whether you want me to sign up to run another marathon or hold your hand through a consult, like I'd like to think that I'm that girl.
You know what? All I can see is I haven't met Stephanie yet, but all I can picture in my mind is Christina on one side and Stephanie on the other side. We, of course, have two ears and one mouth. So I'm trying to picture you hearing things from both sides, like you mentioned, and how listening is and it is something that does not come easily for a lot of people. I am living proof. If it were not for these conversations, I would say my listening skills would be absolutely atrocious.
Well,
They
I would
would,
disagree. I think you're a great listener. You really took a lot of information in from both Christina's story and mine, and were able to weave both of our stories seamlessly.
yeah.
I think you should give yourself a lot more credit. You're an incredible listener.
Well, prior to these conversations, I wasn't. It was absolutely horrible. And I've had to train myself. I've had to really practice and listening to somebody talk for 2 or 3 minutes and find that not even just that nugget or that gem, but find that part of the story and being able to speak to it. So I'm glad that you brought that up because for anybody that is watching this, and if you've come to this point in the video, I would encourage you to practice your listening because everyone has a story. Everyone is speaking. Everyone has a voice. And it doesn't matter if their story, if their voice is similar to yours. Everyone deserves the right to be heard. Everyone deserves the right to be seen. Everyone deserves the right to know that their story matters. And so I would encourage you if you feel like you're not a good listener, if you feel like you're not empathetic, if you feel like you're not compassionate, or if you're not sympathetic, I would use the same words that Vanessa said and give yourself more credit. But I would encourage you to get out there and to have conversations and to listen to people's stories and to meet people where they're at. And hopefully, you will find the same joy. You will find the same delight. You will find the same community that Vanessa has found in her journey, that I found in hearing all of the stories that I've had, including now two sisters, which again is absolutely fantastic. But as I round this conversation out to a close, I want to thank you for your time. You could have ignored my message. You could have responded and said thanks, but no thanks. You could have ghosted. You could have done all of these different things. You could have quote unquote left me on red, but you chose to respond and you chose to give up your time. And so I really appreciate you and giving up your time today to have a conversation with me.
Thank you. I appreciate it, especially where you had this conversation with my sister and getting my point of view and the way I saw things maybe similarly or differently. Thank you for taking me on because I know that might just be like, oh well, I just had somebody who was a BRCA1 provider. Why would I have someone so close follow up? So I just want to really thank you for reaching out and scheduling this and for backstory. My son was sick last week, so we had to reschedule this. So I appreciate you being so flexible as well.
One final ask. I would love here's two asks, or I would say two invitations. I would love to have you and Christina on together. I think that would be an absolutely
Yeah.
incredible conversation. I would love to have a conversation with Stephanie. I really would love to hear her perspective and hear her journey and hear her story because I know she has her own story. And maybe this will be an all-time first. And I will have all three sisters. I will have Christina.
Sure.
I will have Vanessa. Listen. I think that would if we can make that happen, talk to Christina and talk to
Yeah.
Stephanie. And if we can make it happen, I would love to make all three of those videos happen. You and
Yeah, that'd be
Christina,
something.
Stephanie solo, and then all three of you. I think that would be an amazing conversation. But
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. And I will, the same way that they do when you're running the marathon, they stand on the side and they applaud, they clap. I will stand on the sidelines and I will continue to support you and I will continue to applaud you and the work that you do.
Likewise.